Now, do you live in a good country? And what makes a good country? Is it stronger economy, improved infrastructure, better access to health and education, or is it the improved social welfare system? Now, according to my today's guest, a good country is the one that contributes to the common good of the entire humanity. Joining me from the UK, the founder of the Good Country Index, Simon Anholt. Simon Anholt is an independent policy advisor and author. Over the last 20 years, he has helped more than 50 countries to engage more productively with the international community. He has advised dozens of governments on building nation brands, promoting tourism and attracting investments. Good morning, Simon. Congratulations on the release of your new book, The Good Country Equation: How We Can Repair the World in One Generation. Could you please explain our viewers what you meant by repairing the world and how we can achieve that within just one generation?
First of all, I need to send you a copy of the book because I can see there isn't one on the bookshelf behind you, so I will do that today. Let me try and summarize what the book is all about and what I mean by the good country equation. It goes like this. Basically, there are only two things wrong with the world that we live in today. The first one is the way that countries behave, and the second one is the way that people behave. Okay? Now, that says everything and nothing. Basically, the way that countries behave is that they don't collaborate or cooperate enough. Okay, and because all of the challenges that humanity is facing today, from climate change to pandemics to migration to racism and conflict, they're all problems that we can fix if only countries work together to fix them, because each of those problems is too big for any single country to solve on its own. So the first thing we need to do is to change the culture of governance in such a way that countries start to understand that they need to cooperate and collaborate together. That's the first part of the equation. The second part is we need to change the way that people behave so that they stop messing up the planet and they stop messing up society. And that is basically a question of education. So again, in the book, I talk about a proposal I have for a new global compact on educational values that we can all agree on and create a new generation of kids that run towards these global challenges instead of running away from them.
Simon, you created the Good Country Index in 2014, and now the index has undergone several editions. Could you please give us an update on the latest one and just explain what the Good Country Index is?
Well, the Good Country Index needed to be invented because there are hundreds of rankings of countries out there. But basically what they all do is they measure the performance of countries individually and separately. So, you know, what's your GDP, what's your population growth, what's your transparency levels? And yet we live in an age of massive interconnection and interdependency. We are truly one system, whether we like it or not. And so I thought it was time there was an index that measured the external impacts of countries' behavior, not what they're doing for their own people, because you can find that out anywhere, but what they're doing for the world. So in the case of Kazakhstan, for example, if you wanted to know what is Kazakhstan's contribution to the world outside its own borders, to humanity and the planet, this is an index which will give you some quick numbers on that. And when you look at the world and you look at the countries from this perspective, it looks quite unfamiliar, because some of the best run countries are not necessarily the ones that contribute the most to the world in general. And some of the countries that contribute the most to the world in general don't run their own affairs very well. So it's a pretty interesting way of looking at the world.
Finland ranks first in the most recent ranking. I looked at the top 30 countries in the ranking, and they all are prosperous countries with developed economies. Does this mean that a rich country is also a good country?
I hope it doesn't mean that you have to be rich in order to contribute to life on Earth, because if that's the case, then we're really in a bad place. One of the best results in the first edition of the Good Country Index was that Kenya came in the top 30. And that proved a very important point. But what this index is not measuring is charity donations or the size of your economy. In fact, money has got very little to do with it. It's much more to do with the culture of the government and the population and how much they want to be connected with the outside world. Now, having said that, it is certainly true that most of the top-ranking countries are in Western Europe, and they are also wealthy countries. I don't think this is cause, I think it's effect. The countries that have been most effective at cooperating and collaborating with the international community are also the countries that have become wealthiest. And I really, really, really would challenge the assumption that a lot of people make that countries need to sort out their domestic affairs before they have to start worrying about the rest of the world. It's that attitude which has caused most of the problems we're in at the moment. Because even the richest country on earth, the United States of America, you would think it was in a position now where it could start worrying about the rest of the world, and it's doing exactly the opposite. This is a political and cultural decision, not an economic one. So even the poorest countries can benefit enormously by thinking more globally, by thinking more collectively, and by using the wonderful opportunities that this globalized age offers to smaller, poorer, and weaker countries. I'm not talking about morality here. I'm not saying that this is a moral obligation for countries. I'm saying it's an opportunity.
Right. But isn't that natural that some of the developing and emerging countries are looking inwards to first tackle their domestic challenges and address some of the issues at home rather than, you know, participating in the international community for global problem solving?
Absolutely, it's natural. It's 100% natural. And the one thing that I'm not saying with the Good Country Index is that the countries at the bottom of it are bad countries. Right. That's really not what I mean at all. One of the things I explain in the book, and I also said in the TED Talk that I used to launch the Good Country Index back in 2014, is I'm talking about good, the opposite of selfish. I'm not talking about good, the opposite of bad. This is not about sacrificing the limited resources that you have. This is a route to better prosperity. And one of the extraordinary discoveries I made through my research over the years is that the countries that perform best economically are usually the countries with the best image. And the way that you get the best image is by collaborating and cooperating with the international community. So my argument in the Good Country equation is that it is directly and immediately in the interest of all countries, not just rich ones, not just poor ones, to cooperate and collaborate more and to work together on those global challenges, because it will improve their situation very rapidly. You wait till you're rich, it will never happen.
The one thing that surprised me in the index was how low the United States actually was ranked. It was ranked 40th compared to the 21st, I think, position it had during the first ranking. But in contrast to the United States, China and Russia have soared up in the ranking. Russia now occupies a 41st position, and China has went up to the 61st position. What triggered these changes? Why these countries are ranking differently now? Could you give us some insight?
The first thing I should say is that it is an extraordinary irony that the United States and Russia rank almost equally at 40th and 41st place. Having said that, 40th is not especially low. There are 160 odd countries in this index. So as long as a country is somewhere in the top 50, then it means that, broadly speaking, it is contributing more to the international community than it's taking away. Having said that, America has been dropping for a long time. The interesting thing to bear in mind is that the data that drives this particular indicator comes from the United Nations system. Most of it does. And that tends to be about 3 to 4 years out of date. So what you're seeing in the recent editions of the Good Country Index, when you're looking at America, for example, is not the Trump effect, it's the Obama effect, right? Yeah. So there's a big lag in this index. This has nothing to do with politics. America has been retrenching for some years, and it's been focusing more and more and more on domestic issues, shoring up the domestic economy, trying to create what it believes to be a lower state of vulnerability to international forces. China and Russia have been doing exactly the opposite. And China, with the One Belt, One Road, and many initiatives of that sort, are tending to reach more and more outwards, and that shows up in the numbers. It's complex, okay? There are 35 data sets in the indicator, and so you can't pin it down to one individual thing and say, this is what's made China go up, or this is what's made America go down. So what people need to do is they need to go on the website and look at each of those 35 indicators and reach their own conclusions about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I make no judgment, I just present the data.
Well, you know more than anyone that the modern understanding of a country is a nation state with its sovereignty, its clear territory, which is often a historic territory, and unified people. Now, these elements make up the big part, if not the biggest part, of our identities, of our personal identities. With this, I wanted to talk to you about some of your earlier work about country branding. You are the champion and founder of the idea of a nation brand. You have coined the term place brand and nation brand. Tell us, what is a nation brand and what are some of the key elements that make up a nation brand?
Well, you're right. When my story started, nearly 20 years ago now, and I tell the story of this in the book, was helping governments around the world to see if they could do something to improve their nation's standing, to improve its image, because clearly that has a direct impact on their ability to trade and to engage with the international community. Mm-hmm. And pretty much the first thing I discovered when I started researching it is that it is actually impossible to deliberately manipulate the image of a nation. People have been trying since Genghis Khan, but it really doesn't work. And today you see governments spending enormous sums of taxpayers' money on advertising and marketing campaigns and logos and public relations to try and boost the image of their country. And you can see why it would really, really produce benefits if you could do that. But there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this works. There's no correlation in any of my research or any other research I've seen between the amount of money that countries spend on promoting themselves and their overall image. So it turns out that this is not a thing that you can very easily control. Mm-hmm. But, as I said a little bit earlier, what I did discover was that the power of a nation's image is directly correlated to the perception that it is a good neighbor in the international community. Mm. So when, for example, I advised the government of Kazakhstan on these issues a few years ago, my advice to them was the same advice I give to pretty much every country. Forget communications, forget promotion. It's not about bragging. Nobody is interested in how wonderful you think your country is. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is you need to start playing a useful role in the community of nations, doing things that make a difference, making people feel glad that your country exists. And then gradually, over time, and this is a slow process, people might start to reevaluate your country and its role in the world. That's the only recipe I know.
Simon, what role do you think the media plays in creating or reinforcing some of the images and stereotypes we have about each other, about countries, about nations?
I think it's more reinforcing than creating. You as a journalist know this yourself, that probably 98% of the world's media is in the business of simply reflecting people's existing opinions back to them because that's their business. And that's how they continue to sell newspapers, get visitors to the website and all the rest of it. There's a 2% that's interested in actually finding out new stuff and letting people know about it. But that's a very, very rocky road and a very difficult path to follow and doesn't necessarily bring commercial success. That's the traditional media. But one of the reasons why all of this is so interesting, and it's such an interesting topic at this point in human history, is because we now have social media, which has totally changed the game. Because it basically means that if a country does want to emerge, and it does want to play a more significant role in the international community, it does not need to spend an absolute fortune on media in order to get the message across. Mm-hmm. All it has to do is to do amazing things. So I'm trying to think of a good example here. Years and years ago, when the Maldives first began to realize that rising sea levels would basically mean the end of their country, the then president of the Maldives decided to hold a cabinet meeting underwater. And he got the whole cabinet in scuba diving equipment, sitting on the seabed, having a cabinet meeting. Okay, that was a publicity stunt. It wasn't really a proper policy. But it went round the world in 24 hours. Everybody was looking at it. Everybody was talking about it. Take Bhutan and the idea of gross national happiness. Bhutan is one of the smallest, poorest, weakest countries on earth. For a long time, it's been one of the most talked about just because its gift to the world is gross national happiness. So what's done that? Not media.
it's social media that's done that. Because what social media wants is it wants amazing, magical stories to tell about countries, about exotic countries. So all a country needs to do, and this is what I said to the government of Kazakhstan, you just need to project a constant stream of astonishing evidence that you have an important part to play in the world. And in the 21st century, you really can. Because in the 21st century, it's no longer about the size of your economy or the size of your population. It's so much more to do with your thinking, with your imagination, with your ideas, with the genius of your population. Kazakhstan has got all of those. And if you just produce this constant stream of astonishing, magical initiatives, projects, policies, the social media will do your marketing for you. And the conventional media will follow.
Simon, I want to know your opinion on the following. A sequel to a famous American film, Borat, is said to be released soon. As you remember, it ridicules Kazakhstan and in reality has nothing to do with the country. How do you think a film like Borat or Borat 2 can hurt or affect the image of a country that is relatively obscure in the world?
I could spend the rest of my life discussing Borat with you. And I noticed that it still causes pain in Kazakhstan, and I'm not surprised. It was deeply offensive in many ways. I also didn't find it particularly funny, but maybe I have a defective sense of humor. I don't know. What did Borat do? Well, the first thing it did was it proved that if you don't find a way of looking after your own image, then somebody else is going to do it for you. And if you're unlucky, it might be Sacha Baron Cohen. And then your image is not in the hands of somebody that you can trust. So I guess if nothing else, Borat was a message to Kazakhstan to say, look, you need to get your act together and figure out how to be more in control of things and how to play a prominent part in the international community so that you're not just the victim of a filmmaker who was bored one afternoon and couldn't think of a country to bully and so thought of Kazakhstan. The second thing to say is that people around the world beyond your immediate neighborhood of Central Asia, know so incredibly little about Kazakhstan that actually that movie was probably quite useful in that at least it gave you some name recognition. People are not stupid. They saw the film, they realized that it was a piece of comedy. They realized that the real country wasn't really like that. And I understand that it actually gave your tourism numbers quite a boost because people were curious. And they saw the film and they said, well, obviously this is a comedy. I wonder what the country is really like. And they started thinking, and they heard this name, Kazakhstan, over and over again, and it made them quite curious. I think you're probably beyond that stage now. And what you need to be doing is thinking about what you can actually do to prove to people that you're a useful country to have around. I think what's very difficult for a country like Kazakhstan is that it's still very firmly in the competitive mindset. Because, you know, you are, by every international definition, a developing country. And many things about Kazakhstan are in a stage of development because your development was held back by the Soviet Union for so very, very long. And you haven't been sovereign for long enough to have established the full mindset of a country that fully engages with the international community. That does take time. And one of the things I found having these conversations in Kazakhstan was that there was a strong tendency for people to revert back to the competitive mindset. How can we tell people how great we are? How can we tell people about the amazing apples that grow in the east of the country? How can we tell people about our amazing culture? Well, you can tell people, but they're not listening. The last time I checked, there were 200 countries on Earth, and people just, I'm afraid, don't have the time or the patience to worry about any other country apart from their own and maybe one or two others. So the idea that you can tell them about your country and they will listen and they will pay attention is sadly an illusion. So the follow-up to Borat, well, I think maybe the very first thing that the government of Kazakhstan can do better this time is to develop a sense of humor, because you can only fight humor with humor. Whether or not you found that film funny, it is a comic product, and therefore you can only respond with a smile.
Simon, thank you very much for a fascinating and insightful interview.
Thanks so much, Lyazzat.
Have a great day.